Councillor James McCash, and I'm the chair of this meeting and the leader of the council. So the first thing I'm going to do is introduce all our executive members to introduce themselves, and I'm going to start. I'm going to start here and work our way around.
Hi, I'm Councillor Reginald Popular. I am the executive member for Council Homes.
I'm Councillor Vanessa Threadgold. I'm the executive member for Parks and Recreation.
Hi, I'm Councillor Eloise Walden-Day. I'm the executive member for Climate and Council Coordination. Is this better? Hi, I'm Councillor Eloise Walden-Day. I'm the executive member for Climate and Council Coordination.
Hi, I'm Councillor David Watson. I'm the executive member for Community Safety and Engagement.
Good afternoon, I'm Councillor Victor Chamberlain. I'm the deputy leader and I'm the executive member for Neighbourhood Strategic Planning and Wellbeing.
I'm Sam Foster. I'm the executive member for Finance and General Purposes.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Rebecca Corn and I am the executive member for Education and Care.
Good afternoon, I'm Councillor Rachel Bentley. I am the Executive Member for Inclusive Economy, Equalities and Democracy.
Good afternoon, I'm Councillor Alexandra Austin. I am the Executive Member for Public Works and New Council Homes.
And can I invite the officers sitting at the front to introduce themselves as well?
Good afternoon, I'm Maria Gingira with the Constitutional Team.
Good afternoon, I'm Althea Loderick, the Chief Executive.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm John Scarborough. I'm the Interim Director of Law and Governance.
Great, thank you very much. So, as a reminder, this is a public meeting, a meeting held in public. Please could everyone ensure that your mobile phones are switched to silent. This meeting is being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel, so if you're addressing the meeting, please don't disclose any information that you would not wish to be in the public domain. I've had one request from a member of the public who's speaking who does not want their section to be live streamed, so that's something that will be accommodated, so the live stream will be turned off for that period, and please don't film during that period as well for the same reason. In general, filming by members of the public is allowed, but it should be discreet and it shouldn't be allowed to interfere with the meeting. And please only film the people up here, not the people in the public gallery for whom consent has not been given for that filming to take place. So I hope that's clear with everyone. I'm going to move on to start the meeting. So first we have our apologies. I don't believe there are any apologies. Are there any apologies to note? No. No apologies. Right, next, notification of any items of business which the chair deems urgent. And we do, in fact, have 2 items of business which the chair deems urgent. And I think, am I inviting David Quick-Thornton up to speak to these?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Executive. I'm David Quirk-Thornton, the Strategic Director for Children and Adults. Executive, you have asked to be briefed on 2 announcements that you are making today. The first is in relation to the Nest, which is a highly valued mental health service for children and young people in our borough. We will come to the elements of your announcement in a moment, and I'll just give notice that the second announcement that you'll be making today is on the Dementia Advisor Service. Councillor Corn will be speaking to that. So if Chair or Councillor Corn, if you wish to make the announcement, then I'm happy to take any questions or clarification for the exec. Thank you.
Great, we can take those in turn, so maybe we'll start with the announcement on the Nest. Over to you, Councillor Corn.
Thank you, Chair. So this report is to make our position as a new administration absolutely clear. We will protect the Nest. We will prevent it from closing in November, as it was set to do. Child mental health is an absolute priority. We continue to believe that the NHS is the right long-term partner for this service. The NHS has responsibility for children's and young people's mental health, and the Nest has shown that it improves outcomes for young people. And increasingly, NHS colleagues have been referring young people to the Nest. We have every confidence that the NHS will work with us to secure the long-term future of this service. This has always been the approach and has already been made clear. Today's report is to make something else equally clear. Our priority is to protect the service, prevent its closure, and ensure that self-referrals and referrals reopen as soon as possible and without any unnecessary delay. And with this, we commit that a Gateway 2 report is listed for the next meeting of the Executive in September. We will continue to work with the NHS over the coming weeks because that remains the right long-term solution, and the proposal will be brought to September Executive, which establishes a clear timeline for that work. Children and young people's mental health is too important to leave uncertain. I commend this report to the Executive.
Thank you very much, Councillor Corn. So I think I have a couple of questions, if you don't mind, David. So I think could you set out the funding arrangements for the Nest up until now? What arrangements are in place and what governance structures are in place for that?
Certainly. So the funding arrangements for the Nest, when the service opened, it was fully funded by the council, and then over time the NHS, South East London, ICB made a contribution into the service for precisely the reasons Councillor Corn set out, that they were referring children and young people into it. So it was funded laterally by the council and the ICB. That funding, the contract to be specific, ran out in May of this year. In the run-up to that, we were having negotiations between the council and the ICB about future funding, and the council had made clear that we did not have funding, and we made that clear in July last year. So negotiations were ongoing. This was listed for decision on the council forward plan, and that decision could not go ahead because funding was not secured. So the contract expired in May. There was no provision for an extension, and it would have needed a decision in February or March in order to establish a new contract so that the service could continue. The service is currently on a wind down, which is very sad, heading towards November closure until the announcement we've just heard from Councillor Corn a moment ago, and I thank you for that. What we did agree was interim funding, contingency funding, so that any young people accessing the Nest could complete their programmes. All young people on the waiting list could start and conclude their programmes. And additionally, there was a summer programme that the Nest had organised for this summer, and we felt it was very important that went ahead. We should not let children and young people down. So I'm pleased to say that is also going ahead. But the lack of securing funding meant that we could not proceed, the council could not proceed with issuing a new contract to pick up from May. So thanks to the announcement this morning, we will recommence negotiations and discussions with NHS partners, and as directed, we will bring a Gateway 2 report to the next executive meeting.
Great, thank you very much. And I think the key message really that residents are going to care about is that the service that many children, young people are relying upon is secure and will be secure for the term of this administration as a result of this announcement. But I think there are a number of other questions that I think people will want to know the answer to. So I've got a note here to the forward plan. And so this contract ended on May the 31st, and this is a contract with a third-party provider, so you would expect that to be renewed at some point. In terms of the kind of governance arrangements you would expect in the council, at what point would you renew a contract of this scale?
By middle of February this year, because there's a lead-in time in terms of the governance and the procedures around funding, even if it's the same provider continuing. Providers need to make commitments around staffing, and they're part of its groundwork, a fantastic charity who provide this service, but they have their own governance and they need certainty around funding. So middle of February was the date that we were aiming for. Latest possible would have been March to implement in May. It go live from 1st of June.
Understood, thank you. And so the council has a thing called the forward plan, which sets out the decisions that are about to be taken by the administration in the number of months in the future. And there was an item, in fact, on to renew the contract for the nest, which was set in February. I've got a copy of the forward plan on here, and it says removed. So can you clarify what process would have led to the decision to renew and to secure the nest being removed from the forward plan?
So that decision was listed in July 2025 because we always publish well in advance decisions that are coming forward. It was removed in February because the funding had not been secured, and gateway reports can only proceed when the governance is assured that the funding is there. So the process around that is that officers highlight removals in yellow, highlight new in blue, and send that through to the constitutional team and to the Cabinet Office. So then there is sign off. Indeed, at these exec meetings, you'll be seeing the council forward plan. So that's the governance within the council.
Understood. Thank you. That's very clear. Does anyone have any further questions on this item regarding the nest? No, I see nothing. In that case, can I hand over to Councillor Corn for the second announcement?
Thank you, Chair. So in line with the first announcement, this is also to make very clear that our intention as an administration is to protect our support for vulnerable residents, for younger residents and for older residents. So this is for the executive and for me as the executive member as Education and Care to approve a 4-year grant for the sum of $164,000 per year. Total amount being awarded $656,000 for 4 years to the Alzheimer's Society, commencing 1st of September 2026. The grant will re-establish this highly valued service in Southwark to support our residents living with dementia and their families and carers.
Great, thank you very much. Does Councillor Wise want to add anything to this? Councillor Wise in the room? Oh, you're coming in later. Understood, understood. Okay, wonderful. And so I guess a similar question then to David. Can you run through the funding and governance arrangements for this service?
Yes, so the grant that existed previously to the Alzheimer's Society expired in April of this year, and we wanted to be reassured that there was support available to our residents. So I tasked public health colleagues to do some mapping of the NHS provision and the voluntary sector provision. Notice was given to the Alzheimer's Society in January of this year that the grant would be coming to an end and would not be renewed. And whilst there is coverage in terms of post-diagnostic support, and I should acknowledge and thank NHS partners for their investment in this, because we have 3 memory clinics in the borough, the largest of which is run by South London and Maudsley NHS Trust, and they have hired in recent years their own dementia advisor who's embedded in that service. And the GP federations and the ICB have funded 2 Admiral nurses who support people using the other 2 clinics, but also through general practice. So there's been good investment, but I speak from professional and personal experience on this, and I would certainly say that additional support for families supporting loved ones with dementia can only be a good thing. It is incredibly difficult, incredibly challenging, and so the Alzheimer's Society are delighted with this news. They're very excited about restarting the service in Southwark, and I would say that even with the fantastic expertise and specialism that SLAM, South London and Maudsley and the Admiral nurses bring to this, the Alzheimer's Society bring quite a unique aspect to their support. They're deeply compassionate, they're person-centred, they understand what it means for families in every aspect of people navigate, and also how to advocate to get the kind of support that people need. So as good as the NHS provision is, and it is, the Alzheimer's Society also bring a really enhanced level of support for people. So we're delighted that the service is being reinstated, and are delighted to be stepping it up again in Southwark. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And I think, again, I think the key message for that residents will want to hear is that this service is being protected, and that is exactly what's happening. And I'm really pleased that this service, and indeed the Nest as well, which was allowed to lapse previously, has now been protected and been saved from that lapsing. On that note, I'm going to move on to the next item. Thank you very much, David. Right, our next item is the notice of intention to conduct business in closed session, and in any representation received. We will not be doing that. There are no closed items consideration today. However, we will be approving the minutes for the previous closed session. So we'll be going into closed session just to approve those, and that'll be at the end of the meeting. And to be clear, going into closed session means that it's no longer a public meeting. I'm now going to move on to item 5 on the agenda, which is the minutes of the open meeting of the Cabinet. Are those approved? Approved. Thank you. Apologies, I've missed disclosure of interest, which is item number 4. Do members have any disclosure of interest or dispensations they need to make in regard to any decisions taken? Please raise your hand if you do. None have been noted. Thank you. Right, I'm now going to move on to public questions, and I believe we have a public question from Saidat Okatunde. Is Saidat in the room? No, don't see Saidat. Okay, well, a written response has been provided to Saidat, but given that she's not in the room, we will now move on to the next item. Item number 7 are deputations. We've received 2 requests for deputations, and both requests have been accepted. The first deputation is regarding the Dementia Advisory Service, and I've got Cindy Glover, Judith Seckler, and Emma Aldred. Are Judith, Cindy, and Emma in the room? Yes, wonderful. So you have 5 minutes to speak. The way you divvy that up amongst yourselves is entirely up to you, and then the executive member will respond shortly afterwards. I appreciate that the announcement may have... Please use your time as you wish.
Thank you.
And if you could introduce yourself before you speak, that'd be great. Thank you.
Well, I feel like it's not necessary to speak now because we've got the funding, so thank you. But I would like to say, my name's Cindy Glover. I'm retired, but I worked as an occupational therapist for several years in both the health service and local authority. And I specialised in care of the elderly. And I worked as a dementia advisor in Southwark and as a neighbourhood care coordinator for the local voluntary sector organisation. But I was here representing the Southwark Dementia Action Group, where I serve as a volunteer coordinator, co-chair. And the group was established 10 years ago to bring the council, health, voluntary sector and other organisations that support people living with dementia together. And that's coordinated by the part-time dementia engagement officer. And I just wanted assurance that that post will continue as well, because through it we share the information with all these services, we coordinate the services and work collaboratively to improve the support for people living with dementia across Southwark. And it's our remit to also help Southwark remain a dementia-friendly borough, which it awards a status for in 2014. So that's a different question from the one I was going to be making. The other thing is that we do work very closely with the health service. They do work very closely. The Dementia Advisory Service does work very closely with the health service. And the total cost of the service that they provide, as was said, is £164,000 a year, and it's been in the borough for over 20 years. But I just wanted to make sure that you realise that actually that's a very cheap service compared with all the work that the carers do, and also it's a cost avoidance, because if you ensure that the dementia advisors posts are employed, it results of a cost being cut. It can delay the people going into long-term care, and it costs £1,000 a week for someone to be in residential care. So a dementia advisor, if they can just delay 4 people, the 4 people can prevent 4 people entering permanent health care, you have paid for the whole service. So I almost ask that you should actually increase the number of dementia advisors rather than negate them. Yeah, that's a question, I guess. I'd also like to say that they work very closely with the health service, but also with COPSIN's partners, which are the consortium of older peoples in Southwark, Blackfriars Settlement, and all the others that you know of, Time and Talents. And I just, I think, they give advice to them, and also go to their carers groups and do a great service. And I feel that they should be mentioned as really essential partners, and that their funding shouldn't ever be cut either, if indeed they get any. I don't know if they do or not, because I'm retired and I'm out of that now. So that's all that I wanted to say, really. But thank you very much.
Did you want to add something? You've got a couple of minutes left. Introduce yourself as well.
My name is Judith. I'm the sole carer for my husband, who was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in November 2022. I'm just here to tell you what it's like to be a carer. You've already heard, actually, from the gentleman who started off. But clearly, you should think of me as one dementia carer out of at least 2,000 in Southwark, many of whom are further along this line, this difficult journey, than we are. When St Thomas's diagnosed my husband, I was given an enormous pack of leaflets about all aspects of the disease, and that was it. We have not heard from them since. I did not know where to turn locally for advice and support. Web searches and the documents from the hospital never seemed to answer the questions I had. I have to say I was surprised at myself, because I've always been a person who can solve problems, my own problems, without needing to ask for help and hand-holding. But this is a completely new and frightening situation. I felt very lost. All I can say is thank you for agreeing to continue with the dementia advisors, because they are so, so important.
Thank you so much for your contribution, and thank you for all the amazing work you've been doing in the community. Thank you.
Okay, can I just add, actually, that they journey with the person right from diagnosis, when they get the referral through from them, right through to death. And that's an amazing thing for people to be able to just have access to. Really, really essential, and we need more, not less. Thank you.
So I'm going to let Councillor Corn and Councillor Wise respond.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you both so much for being here, and thank you for sharing very personal experiences with us. It's really valuable, really valued. I want to acknowledge also the strength of feeling that exists around this issue. Dementia affects whole families, not just individuals. Support services are vital support and sometimes a lifeline. And I understand why people have taken up this issue so passionately. This is about dignity, and it's about ensuring support. And as a disabled person myself, I know the indignity and delay that there is in accessing services and support. And as someone who has spent many years campaigning against cuts to disability support, I also know how frightening it is to experience that uncertainty. So during Disability Pride Month, I am incredibly proud that we are protecting our dementia advisor service through the Alzheimer's Society. I will now introduce and ask my colleague Councillor Wise, as Deputy Executive Member for Adult Services, to respond in more detail, but thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Corn, and thank you both of you for your speech today. I was actually extremely moved listening to what you said, so thank you. I really wanted to start to place on record my thanks to the Alzheimer's Society and to the staff and volunteers who've supported and continue to support Southwark residents over many years and the valuable work that you do. The Dementia Advisory Services grant came to an end under the previous administration. We were made aware of it relatively recently, and I'm really pleased that we've been able to find a solution to continue with the services under the new administration. There's obviously strong strength of feeling around this issue, and the value many people place on having a dedicated advice and support following a dementia diagnosis, including having someone to talk to that understands your personal circumstances. I do really understand. Since taking on responsibility as the Deputy Executive Member for Adult Services, I've looked carefully at the concerns raised by residents, carers and other stakeholders. There is obviously a growing need for dementia services as our population ages, and we're committed to ensuring residents can access the support they need, which is why I'm so pleased that we have been able to bring forward proposals to fund ongoing dementia advisor support. We are looking at this service with new eyes, and in particular want to provide as inclusive a service as we possibly can. One thing that I think we should consider, and we will talk to the Alzheimer's Society about, is, for example, recruiting a Spanish-speaking dementia advisor, which would be specifically there to support our large Latin American population. So the service is going to continue. It will receive referrals from across the system and self-referrals to assess the needs of both people with dementia, their families and their carers. As we've already heard actually, but I'll just briefly mention it again, the Dementia Advisory Service continues to sit alongside other services that are now available, the NHS memory services, Admiral nurses, community organisations and other local provision, and I think together this should ensure that residents continue to have access to the advice, the dedicated advice and support that they need. I also want to say that services work best when the providers of those services listen to the people who use them, and your deputation today has been a really important reminder to me and my colleagues of that principle. So I would therefore be really happy to continue to meet with yourselves and your group and other residents interested in this area as the work develops. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And just one final thing to say is I was very kind of taken by the deputation as a whole, particularly what you were saying, there, Judith, about how you're someone who feels you can kind of get everything done on your own and kind of get things moving, and suddenly you feel kind of lost. Because a few years ago my dad was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and as it developed it turned into Parkinson's dementia, and my mother really struggled, and she's exactly the same, just like you. She's always been the person I would turn to who could do everything, and she found it really difficult. It ended up being me stepping in, trying to juggle that alongside being the council and being a primary school teacher, and it was a lot, and it feels very isolating. It's like you in your home, the support's not clear, the signposting isn't obvious, and it's really challenging. So just want to just really emphasize how valuable what it is you do is, both in terms of the direct care, in terms of the work you're doing in the community, and just really want to emphasize that we want to work with you. We want to do everything we can to make sure that older people, and actually in line with that idea as well, the person who I reached out to when I was having a really difficult time with that was actually Councillor Esme Dobson, who's in the audience there, who I know has done a lot of work with you as well, and she was so supportive, and I can see she's been very supportive to you as well, which I think is wonderful. So thank you. Thanks. Right, we now have another deputation, this time regarding the Nest, and I have Esme Campbell, Ruby Ukera-Shaw, Saba Alam, Jacqueline McCann, and Sabrina Brown. You can see there are, I read 5 names, there's only 3 of you, so if you could introduce yourself before you start speaking, and you've got 5 minutes to speak. Oh, sorry, 1 second. Is this the point where we want the live stream to go off, isn't it? Is that correct? Are you sure? We can turn it off if you want to. Okay. So I say you've got 5 minutes between the 3 of you. Divvy it up as you wish, but if you could, in fact, maybe, so we don't eat into your time, why don't you introduce yourself first, and then I'll start the time after. So maybe all 3 of you can introduce yourselves.
Hi, my name's Saba Alam, and My name is Saba Alam. I recently finished my course with the Nest and I just wanted to advocate for it today.
My name's Simran Kaur. I'm finishing my sessions with the Nest and yeah, I'm also here to advocate for it today.
Can you say your name again? Sorry, I didn't catch it.
Simran Kaur.
Simran Kaur. Didn't have you down, but that's fine.
My name's Rabia Cairo.
Oh, sorry, if you could turn yours off when you're not speaking. Otherwise. Yes. Sorry about that.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Well, there we go. Nailed it.
My name's Rabia Cairo Shaw and I completed my course at the Nest around a year and a half ago.
Wonderful. Well, great to see you, Saba, Simran, and Ruby. As I say, you've got 5 minutes. Use as you divide it up as you wish. I'll set the timer. Off you go.
Well, we were here today to save the Nest, but as we can see, it has been saved. I just want to advocate today that I will be sharing my experience to show how much value the Nest has provided and how it is a life-saving service. A year ago today, I lost my grandma and the sense of who I was alongside her. I was a student living alone, struggling financially and grieving in a way I didn't have words for. By winter, I wasn't the person I knew, and I'd lost my bubbly, optimistic way of seeing the world, and I couldn't see any days past that. At my lowest, I had thoughts of not wanting to be here, and that's not something I say lightly. It's not something I say for effect. It's why I know this service actually does help people. I've had counselling before, and what the Nest offered has been very different. We've gone through holistic energy work, artistic methods, and alongside that, a lot of traditional support as well. As someone spiritual, the typical approach doesn't always work. It wasn't just talking through the grief. I had to be guided back into my body, my creativity, my faith, and the parts of me that grief had switched off. Sophie didn't just support me, well, my therapist, through the worst of it. She helped me find ways back to God, back to beauty and wanting to be here. I can point to specific moments where her guidance changed the direction I was heading in. I'm one person, but I know I'm not the only young person in South London who needed this kind of support and found it nowhere else. Losing this service doesn't just close a building, it removes one of the only holistic, spiritually inclusive options young people here have while they're grieving. I may not have made it through last winter without the Nest, and that's not an exaggeration. It's the reason why I'm asking you to keep it open. I mean, we've already established that, but I would also like to say thank you for not closing the Nest. And how, Cabinet, are you going to tell all the team members and family members the good news? And will you be visiting the Nest anytime soon?
I'm of course also very grateful for the decision to keep the Nest open. I wanted to express that as someone who's been in and out of therapy services and counselling since like early years of primary school, the Nest has provided me with the most efficient tailored experience yet. Its accessibility as a free therapy service was entirely crucial for me, living in a household with younger siblings with additional needs requiring educational support, meaning that mental health can't always take financial priority. During my initial consultation at the Nest, I was offered with a range of different therapies, which each provided different ways of learning to cope with the challenges that I face. This part of the service stood out to me specifically as since I did play therapy in year 4, I was only ever able to explore talking therapies. Crucially, my sessions with the Nest have been most successful due to their ability to operationalise my mental discoveries, providing me with actionable strategies which have helped me to improve my ability to cope massively. Coming to the end of my sessions with the service in a couple of weeks' time, I feel more stable and independent than ever before. Growing up with a mother who works in social care for adolescents, I've heard consistently about how the Nest has provided support to children of a number of backgrounds facing a multitude of challenges in the home. This strengthens my confidence in the necessity of this service and the importance of accessibility due to accessibility to psychological healthcare as well as physiological. It's obvious that the quality of life can be improved not just from being in optimal physical health, but mental health as well, stressing how the existence of this service is so clearly beneficial to our community of young people for whom there's an inevitable responsibility to protect. Overall, I'm very pleased with the decision to keep the nest open. Thank you for listening.
Just to do yours. I feel like I'm cursed. Okay. Hello, I'm Ruby. Maybe over here. Okay. Sorry, I'm gonna have to hold it. Sorry, guys. So I'm Ruby. I've lived in Southwark my whole life, and I've grown up in the local state schools, and I found my time at the Nest invaluable. Throughout my early life, I had 2 friends die. Experiencing grief at any age is traumatic, but experiencing it at the age of 7 and then again at 12 reshifts your perspective on life. I received minimal support from school during these periods, and despite having an incredible family and support network in other ways, these experiences severely impacted my life in ways I'm still understanding now as an adult. I had a tough time during secondary school. I was undiagnosed dyslexic and ADHD, and I was a hard worker, but I constantly struggled in my lessons. I was bullied from the ages of 13 to 17 and dreaded being at school. Research from Cardiff University earlier this year found that in childhood, boys are diagnosed with ADHD roughly 3 times more often than girls, but by adulthood, that gap closes to almost 1v1, which tells you how many girls like me are struggling quietly and being missed. During this time, I was suffering with undiagnosed endometriosis as well. I missed months of school as constant fainting and vomiting meant that I didn't have the strength to attend classes. The mental impact of having an invisible chronic illness, with doctors telling me for 11 years that periods are meant to be painful and to take a paracetamol wore away at my mental health. And I'm not alone in that way. The average time to have an endometriosis diagnosis in the UK is now 9 years and 4 months, and that's gotten worse, not better, since 2020 when it was 8 years. When I signed up for the Nest, I was in a fragile part of my life. I'd wanted to access therapy for years, but was never in a financial position to afford it. Neither were my parents, and working as a freelancer meant that I didn't have the normal structures that other friends had. I felt like I was constantly battling my own mind, and my confidence in myself and my abilities was slowly sinking. My time at the Nest is something I look back on with so much pride and empowerment. Therapy is never easy, but I'm so glad I took the steps to bettering myself. Reflecting on what's happening in the world right now, our government have just implemented a social media ban for under 16s. We're finally understanding the damage unregulated access can do to children. And I think it's incredible that we're taking the steps to protect children's lives. And that's why having the Nest here is so important, because it's protecting people that weren't protected in the first place. I grew up during the times of Ask FM, Snapchat, horrific places to be online as a 13 through to 18-year-old. And still now, social media is my job. It's what I love to do, but I understand the impacts of it. I wasn't on social media for many years later than my peers because of my bullying. The Nest didn't just give me therapy, it gave me back the version of myself that grief, misdiagnosis and years of being dismissed has worn down. There is someone in Southwark right now sat exactly where I was, struggling, unheard and out of options. And I'm so glad that we've decided to extend the funding to the Nest so that they can get the help they will. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, Saba, Simran and Ruby. And yeah, thank you for sharing your experiences. Thank you for your bravery. I'm very sorry about the tech not not working quite as it should do. I'm going to hand over now to Councillor Corn to respond.
Thank you all three for sharing some really personal experiences. I want to acknowledge what courage that has taken. We really appreciate you coming up and sharing your experience and also your advice. I want to reassure you that I hear the concern, I understand the uncertainty, and I know that the Nest has mattered so much to so many young people. I want to acknowledge that there has been genuine concern expressed on this issue by young people, families, staff, residents about the future of the Nest, and by people who have worked so hard to establish and keep it going. The Nest has supported thousands of young people in Southwark, and I completely understand why people care so deeply about its future. And I want to thank everyone who's spoken up, and especially you three. If people are worried about children and young people, losing support, I believe they should speak up. I want to thank Groundwork London, the staff and the volunteers, and for many young people using this service. You know, they've been the trusted adults, as you've explained, at very difficult moments in young people's lives, and this is something that's incredibly important and that we respect a great deal. I'm grateful to the work and the commitment, and I can promise that I will respect that work, that support, especially because it's something that I've done myself. So what you might not know about me is that I'm coming into this role after years of working in child protection, mostly in conflict zones around the world, also with Barnardos locally. One of the lessons that I've learned through that work is that when people are frightened about losing support, they're rarely talking about just one service. This is speaking from years of experience of being let down, uncertainty, bureaucrats talking about cuts, waiting lists, overstretched systems, and feeling lost amongst it. I get it. This is young people waiting for people to respond, where you are, and knowing and trusting that systems of support are going to stay there, and knowing that these systems have become increasingly fragile in this world. So I understand why you've been concerned, and I understand why people have campaigned. And I understand that trust in new representatives can sometimes feel uncertain. And I won't ask that you trust that I'll work hard for young people's mental health. I am ready to prove it to you again and again. This is the first step, but we'll continue. And I want to also acknowledge the uncertainty that this situation has created. When I learned that the nest was at risk of closure, I decided not to issue a statement. Instead, we began working to save it. And the reason that I decided not to make that statement immediately is because of the uncertainty, the fear, the anxiousness that this can create. But when we were asked for comment, I made a conscious decision again that my writing, you might have seen in the Southwark News, was writing to young people directly, not journalists, not the electorate, not parties. And I want to repeat that message again today for any young people that might be watching our meeting. If you are a young person who has used the nest, who's using the nest, if you're worried about its future, I want to know that you matter. You deserve support when life feels difficult. You deserve to be listened to. You deserve adults who will keep working hard to find solutions rather than giving up. That's what we're doing today. That's what I promise that we will continue to do. I will continue working hard every day for you, for young people in Southwark. You are not and will never be optional extras. And I remain strongly committed to ensuring that children and families continue to benefit. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Beck, and thank you. Do you want one very brief thing? Go on. It's technically against the rules, but
just to reiterate the questions earlier, will the cabinet member please visit the nest soon?
I would love to.
Thank you. And I think it would be good to let the family members and the team know how important their work is and how they are helping the community.
Thank you very much. So we are wrapping up. We're wrapping up the deputation section. I'm aware there may be people in the audience who came exclusively for the deputation. If you would now like to leave, you're welcome to do so. Equally, if you want to stay for the rest of the thrilling meeting we have ahead of us, then you're invited to do that as well. I see people are going for the first option.
Sorry, there was one person who couldn't make it, but she's put her testimony on paper. We said we'd read it out, but obviously that moment's gone.
Thank you, Councillor Ali.
Thank you.
Great. So we're now moving on to item 8 on our agenda, which is affordable, safe and green, the Joint Administration's ambition for Southwark. So this is essentially setting out what it is that we want to achieve in this 4 years. It's very much the kind of starting point to a longer conversation. Well, not the starting point, I guess the conversation's been ongoing for some time. But we've set out a vision in this document for how we want Southwark to look in 4 years' time. And it's a vision that's very much grounded in the priorities of the people of this borough who've spoken to us during the election campaign, before and after. It's called affordable, safe and green. And those are the 3 values that will thread through every single decision that we take. How can we make our borough more affordable? How can we make it safer? And how can we make it greener? And sitting within those are 7 overall priorities. So that first one is a borough that we can afford. Because we know that this is an amazing place to live here in Southwark, but we also know it's a place that is increasingly difficult to afford to stay in. We've spoken to families who feel they need to leave the city or leave the borough to raise their children, or people struggling to get by with increasing rents and increasing cost of living pressures. We're also focusing on, of course, the housing crisis. So we've inherited a situation where we have a housing service that is labelled as failing by both the regulators and by residents, and we clearly need to tackle that as well. The climate emergency, our third priority, something that is just so inherent to both the parties that make up this joint administration. And we want to make sure that climate isn't just an afterthought, something that's tacked on at the end, but rather something that threads through everything. Our fourth priority about a safer Southwark is about ensuring that people feel safe and are safe whatever it is they're doing, wherever it is that they are. The fifth priority about clean and green streets, again, reflects those top priorities that so many residents speak to us about. It's clean in terms of no fly tipping, no waste in the ground, and green in terms of both, having trees and green spaces, but also, in line with, in equilibrium with our natural environment in terms of promoting walking and cycling and decreasing private motor vehicle use. The last 2 are sort of enablings for the previous 5. So number 6 is defending Southwark's interests. Our administration is accountable first and foremost to the people of Southwark, not to our political parties, not to Ed Davey, not to Zach Polanski, not to Keir Starmer, not even to Andy Burnham, who's let's note our congratulations to him as well today. And starting with that, it's about dealing with the funding settlement that we've been left. A £102 million funding gap that we somehow need to plug over the coming years. And we're going to do that in a range of different ways. I think probably that Councillor Foster will touch upon later. But it's starting from the point that we're not just going to meekly accept this as all we can have. But then that last point, which is the one I want to talk about a little bit more, is the priority that we'll be a council that listens and that residents can shape. I think it was very appropriate. It wasn't planned, but it was very appropriate that our first meeting began not with our executive talking about our priorities, but about hearing from residents who had their priorities that they wanted to share with us. And that's absolutely how we're going to lead this council and how we're going to lead this administration. Listening to residents genuinely, taking on board their concerns and their priorities and making sure that shapes the work that we do. And shaping the work that we do is that latter bit as well, about the priorities of residents shaping our work, whether it's in terms of financial decisions, whether it's in terms of devolving power down to community councils. And I'll wrap up because I know that all my colleagues will want to say lots on this as well. But we're a joint administration, which means that we're an administration that is founded on the basis of working together. And that's not just a negotiation between 2 political parties, although it was. It's also about working across the council, having strong working relationships with our hardworking, professional and effective officers, some of whom in the room and many of others are out in the streets in our estates, making our residents' lives better. And it's also about working with residents, about starting from the basis that when a resident raises a concern, we should take it seriously. We should assume it's being raised in good faith and that they know what they're talking about. That's what we're trying to set out. I'm going to hand over to the Deputy Leader in a moment, and I'm going to hand over to other executive members who I know have lots of things to add to that. But Victor.
Thank you, Chair. I'm also delighted to welcome this report, and I'd just like to put on record our thanks to all the officers that have supported the development of this report, and also supported the Joint Administration as we start our journey. In May, the people of Southwark sent a very clear message to the Council. They voted for change, they voted to fix Southwark, and they also chose collaboration over division. They expected those elected to put their party politics aside and to work together in the best interest of our borough. This Joint Administration is determined to do exactly that. The document in front of us sets out the bold ambition that will guide us over the next 4 years. It's not the finished piece of work, but it's an incredibly strong starting point for what we will be doing over the 4 years. It establishes those principles, the priorities for our Joint Administration and our direction of travel as we form the basis of our Borough Action Plan, which will be released later in the year. And throughout the election campaign, whatever side you were campaigning on, in every part of the borough, and in the weeks since, residents have been remarkably consistent about what they told us. They want to see a borough that is more affordable. They want to feel safer in their communities. They want cleaner streets and more action on the climate emergency. And above all, they want a council that will actually listen to them. This is exactly what sits at the heart of this ambition. Affordable, safe and green are clear principles that will shape every decision we make as a Joint Administration. Whether tackling the housing crisis that we've inherited, standing up for better funding from the Labour government, or supporting families through the cost of living emergency, improving our streets or restoring power back to our diverse neighbourhoods, and restoring trust in local democracy. These principles will guide our work at every step. And none of this underestimates the challenge that we face. We've inherited a legacy of an administration that was stuck in its ways over the last 16 years. It stopped listening to residents, and it's left us with a funding gap of over £102 million. Southwark's housing services were given the second worst rating by the government regulator after years of failure by the last Labour administration. It needs a fundamental rebuilding and to re-establish trust with communities and residents. We face growing demand across many of our public services, particularly around temporary accommodation and SEND. These challenges are very real, and they won't be an excuse for us lowering our ambition. They are a reason that I think we need to think differently about how we do local government, how we work differently across and collaboratively, and how we deliver differently for our residents. For me, one of the most important commitments that we've made in this document is that we won't govern in a silo here at Tooley Street. We want to rebuild trust back by listening to communities, listening to our residents, empowering communities and neighbourhoods, reintroducing strong community councils that Labour scrapped, and ensuring that local people have a genuine voice over the decisions that affect them and where they live. That represents real change in how this council works. And this ambition belongs not just to this administration, but to everyone that wants Southwark to succeed. We know that building a better borough will require partnership with residents, with business, with voluntary organisations, our public services and colleagues across the council. Together we have an opportunity to build Southwark that is more affordable, safer and greener, and a borough where people can afford to stay, where communities thrive, where we protect the most vulnerable, and where future generations inherit a better borough than the one that we've inherited. I'm really proud of this document and I commend it to the executive.
Thank you, Councillor Chamberlain. So, can you put your hand if you want to speak? Is it everyone? It is everyone. I thought it was going to be everyone. In that case, I'll go the opposite way around to last time. I'm going to start with Councillor Austin. Over to you, Councillor Austin.
I am incredibly proud of this document and thank you very much for the formation of it. I really welcome the priorities of tackling our housing crisis and certainly from a personal point of view, as well as looking at a borough that we can afford, because as we all know, we are currently in a cost of living crisis and the main driver for that is the affordability of housing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm also incredibly proud of this, and I just want to say it's been a really intense few weeks. I've had a job title change, but I did want to say that I think it does reflect. I want the role of the economy cannot be understated right now. We have a borough that has so many unique strengths. We're all proud of it. We're proud to represent it, but it is desperately unequal. And the council and the public sector, we would all agree, I'm sure, that they're not the answer to all of our problems, but we can, in this building and through our work, create an environment that enables and empowers people, community, and businesses to succeed, and that we have an economy here that works for everyone. But I think the other thing I wanted to say, it's about that equalities piece as well. Everyone should be able to thrive here, and quite frankly, we know that that's not the case. So whether you're a new Londoner or you've lived here for decades, whether you need a little bit of temporary support, whether you need a lifelong partner, we need to make sure that we're supporting everyone. And finally, on that democracy piece, it's about having confidence in this place and in this borough and making sure that your voice is heard and respected. So what you said about a joint administration, I think it is a different way of working. It is a partnership, and we need to make sure that we actually live that, not through just our words here, but in our actions wider. Thank you.
I'm going to echo my colleagues. I think you've heard a lot from me already today, so I won't take up lots of time. But I do want to say how important this is, both for our young people, our older people, for everybody who is here in Southwark and for whom Southwark is home. And for for young people, for older people, for refugees, being an affordable place means access. It means access to education and to community. It means support for families and children to stay here. Currently, we have a situation where children are leaving the borough, families are leaving the borough, and that has caused schools to close. We want this to be a safer place, and that means coherent prevention and protection of everybody who is here. And a greener borough also means climate justice. This also means that we recognise the situation around the world that is displacing people, that is changing our future. So I want to just say that I really celebrate this report and our commitment as an administration to make Southwark a better place to grow up and grow older.
Thanks, Chair. I would want to focus on what you highlighted earlier in terms of defending our interests and the work we're doing around that. Obviously, we've come in at a time of austerity, which we've been living through for 2 decades now, and is continuing to be baked in. And the council is impacted by an increased level of austerity, actually, rather than a reversal of it due to government funding cuts. And I think that it's important that what's really crucial about this being a priority of the administration is that it was really only possible for the government to remove our funding, which was not buttressed by a narrative in a way that austerity was in the 2010 era, because it happened in quite an invisible way. And I think working with other Green councils across London, and indeed Liberal Democrat councils as well, as many local authorities are facing similar situations, is really, really important to raise the salience of this issue so that these things can't be done in a kind of a quiet way that changes the numbers on a spreadsheet, but is something that where the cost of it is really visible. So we're going to be organising a cross-party summit to push back against austerity, and we'll be shouting really, really loudly about these issues, and I'll have more to say in my various reports coming later on. And I also wanted to touch as well on the importance of the council that listens and that residents can shape, which gets to the importance of what's been mentioned already in terms of our grassroots community-led approach, where we'll be drawing people into the budget setting process. We'll be really open, talking a ton about what we're doing, what the challenges are, and trying to involve as much as possible communities in setting the budget. I think it is the collaborative approach that's being set out that's at the heart of our administration as well. And it's also a recognition of the importance of the power and knowledge that exists in our communities to affect their own lives, and the need for us to build that. As we're seeing our institutions threatened by these funding shortfalls, there is a need for us to come together to stand up and fight back against that with a single voice. So I think it's a really valuable part of the administration's priorities.
Unsurprisingly, I'm also a huge fan of this document. We were pretty clear when we came together as a joint administration that making Southwark safer would be a priority, alongside making our borough more affordable and greener. So I'm really pleased that we are confirming this today as we set out our ambition for the next 4 years. Unfortunately, tackling crime and antisocial behaviour is one of the main concerns raised by residents when I'm out talking to people on the doorsteps and at community meetings. And this has just been underlined, sadly, by all of the messages I've received from residents, community groups and fellow members during my first few weeks in this role. The situation is hugely challenging, with an unacceptably high crime rate in Southwark and the Met Police facing historic levels of underfunding from central government. And our residents need us to step up and use all the levers at our disposal to improve community safety. So I'm really pleased this council will do more to tackle antisocial behaviour, including by increasing our investment in enforcement officers and community wardens. These are the people that are out there on our streets, in our estates, in our parks every day, a visible presence there to help tackle antisocial behaviour. We're also going to invest in prevention and better integrate our enforcement approach and tools. And of course, we can't do this alone. It's a team effort with partners like the police, but also our exceptional local community groups and residents who are determined to make their neighbourhoods safer. And I'm really looking forward to working with them to make Southwark safer over the next 4 years.
Thanks, David. Another fan to be added to the list of the document. I'm particularly pleased. I'm somebody who's campaigned for a number of years on climate here in the borough. I've been in this room multiple times in front of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee and Council Assembly as an activist. It's kind of wild to now be on this side of the table, but I'm really delighted to be part of a Green Lib Dem joint administration that has climate action running all the way through the centre of this document, through the centre of our commitments. That's exactly where it belongs. My portfolio is climate and council coordination. Explain them both. Climate, isn't a distant threat. We've all experienced these record-breaking heat waves in the last few weeks. We know Southwark's at high risk for flooding. We feel the rising costs that are coming from increasingly unstable climate. These aren't just environmental issues in a silo. They affect our homes, our health, our economy, and all the most vulnerable in our communities. The climate crisis in Southwark is an issue of racial and social justice. So the scale of this crisis, everybody is pointing out across the country and internationally, demands a new level of ambition. I was in this room, or maybe the room on the other side, in 2019, when Southwark declared unanimously across the council a climate emergency, committing to make the entire borough carbon neutral, in brackets, net zero, by 2030. We and so many other institutions are obviously way off pace. So we need a different response. The borough is not adequately protected from the impacts of climate breakdown. We need to reset our ambition. So our role as a joint administration is to not only lead by example, but to bring together businesses, anchor institutions and communities so everyone plays their part in ensuring a greener and more resilient borough. And then the council coordination bit is over the next few months. I'll be leading this process of turning this vision document into a practical programme of delivery with clear outcomes, deliverables and metrics underneath it, with climate justice really at the heart. So pretty happy to be on this side of the table.
Thanks, everyone. So I'm so proud to be the first ever executive for Parks and Recreation in our joint administration. And I gather that new titles have been popular in the council this week. Our parks and green spaces are some of the most valuable spaces that we have in Southwark, and I want all residents to feel like those spaces belong to them. These are your parks. The more present we are in our green spaces, the more loved they are. The more loved they are, the safer they're going to feel. As a borough, we're never truly present, though, unless we're all there, and that means widening participation. I will work alongside friends groups, residents associations, community groups, and other representatives to make sure our parks are accessible and welcoming. I'll encourage more stewardship over small green spaces by investing in community gardening and food growing. Nobody should feel like they don't belong in these spaces. Diversity and inclusion is our strength. Culture is our strength. I'll make sure play is more welcoming for teenage girls so they don't leave the playing field early. Working alongside Councillor Corn to make sure the youngest of children are thought about when designing play, so we have adequate free provisions for some of our most vulnerable families. The same goes for leisure and sports. Our leisure centres should feel open to people who've never crossed the threshold of a gym. I'm dedicated to making sure we make these decisions with the climate crisis in mind, working closely with Councillor Walden Day to make sure our parks are biodiverse, provide shade in the hottest days, and are defended against the climate crisis. I know we have some tough financial decisions ahead, but we'll work through those decisions together, and I'll happily collaborate with any councillor who approaches the table with a residents first approach. So looking forward to working with the joint administration and even more importantly with the residents of Southwark.
Cheers, Chair. Of course, I also am in complete favour of this. Of course, people's titles have changed. I think mine is quite self-explanatory. And I just want to speak about the housing crisis aspect of the work of this joint administration. We all know that we are a large landlord. We have 55,000 households in the borough, and I'm so proud that that we've got a significant contribution in the fact that we are able to provide safe and truly affordable homes to people. But of course we all know that we need to of course be a much better landlord than we currently are right now. As colleagues have mentioned already, in 2024 the housing department was rated C3, and it demonstrated that significant improvements needed to occur in the department. And I just want to make it quite clear that what needed to happen wasn't only a tick box exercise, but we needed to improve the material conditions of those on our council estates, in our council homes in general, but to also increase the participation of the residents in decision making that we are currently taking. Unfortunately, over the past few years, we've been on that journey, and we want to continue on that journey. But this proposal demonstrates the ambition that of course we want to go through in the next few years. So first and foremost, we need urgent action on damp and mould and repairs in general. Members here probably heard whilst campaigning that our repair service simply isn't working. We also know that unfortunately residents just do not feel that they are heard when there is a true crisis in their home. So from day one, I've been working quite closely with officers to improve the service, to ensure that it's a repair service that works for all. The next one is, and I've banged on about this since day dot, and officers do of course know this, we have a significant number of voids in our council estate. It's an absolute scandal that we have over 21,000 residents on our council waiting list, and there are hundreds of void properties that are left empty. We know that the council could be doing a lot more to bring those homes into use, and that is why we have created a dedicated voids team to ensure that we bring those homes back in to use. We need to ensure that these empty homes can truly be a home for many years for these people, and I'm working quite closely with officers in terms of that. And lastly, we want to ensure that our service in general is genuinely inclusive and responsive when residents come to us with their issues. For far too long, decision making has been siloed in Tooley Street, and we want to put power and engagement right back into our estates. So that is why I've tasked officers to work very closely with our TRAs, SGTOs and third parties to ensure that we are collecting that feedback, that we are working quite closely with people that encounter our services, and hopefully over the next 4 years, I can say at the end of my tenure that we have left the housing service in a much better place than when we first encountered it. And lastly, we are going to be doing a lot more work in terms of campaigning for the funding that we desperately need to ensure that our housing stock is adequately funded for the long term. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, everyone. In fact, I'm very, very proud to be able to work with such a wonderful, committed, and dedicated team who come to this role with a range of different backgrounds, range of experiences, range of skills, but nonetheless united by that kind of commitment to improve the lives of residents, to make our borough a better place, not to play silly political games, but to make Southwark more affordable, safe, and green. Right, we are 1 hour and 12 minutes into the meeting. We have covered 3 substantive items. We have 12 more to go. We are now going to pick up the pace quite considerably, but I'm going to hand over to Councillor Watson to introduce item 9 on the rent. Oh, I realise actually we need to. Sorry. Can we note that just document? Great, it's noted. Councillor Watson, over to you to speak on the Renters' Rights Act 2025.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thank you to colleagues. So I'm pleased to introduce this report seeking the approval for the new private sector housing enforcement policy. You're looking at me as if I shouldn't be speaking. Is that correct? No, I'm just gonna carry on then. It's a team effort here, everybody, so we'll see work feedback always encouraged, which subject to executive approval will be implemented immediately. So the new joint administration has been clear that it will put residents first and take action to help fix the housing crisis. We also want to reset the relationship between the council and our residents and our communities. After over a decade of being told by Labour that they know best, this administration will set a new centre of gravity for the council that is resident-driven and responsive. And this new policy will give the council the powers and the tools required to become the champion for tenants that residents need and deserve. The private rented sector plays a vital role in Southwark, with almost 30% of households in the borough currently renting from a private landlord. However, it's equally clear that standards need to be raised across the board. We know that residents that rent from a private landlord can face significant challenges around affordability, insecurity of tenure, and in too many cases, poor housing conditions. Conditions in parts of the private rented sector remain worse than in other tenures, with many homes containing one or more significant hazards. So this policy provides a single enforcement framework for the private rented sector and will apply irrespective of where relevant housing functions sit within the council. It ensures a consistent, robust and transparent approach to enforcement across all private sector housing activities. So why is the policy being presented now? Well, because the Renters' Rights Act 2025 is being implemented in phases and coming into force at different points. These housing needs enforcement functions came into effect in May 2026, and there are further enforcement provisions, including the new requirements relating to housing hazards that came into force in June, and we are now incorporating these into the policy. Southwark's not alone in doing this. We're doing this alongside our peer local authorities, updating the enforcement frameworks to reflect the scale of the legislation, the ambition of the legislation and the opportunities it presents. We've got 3 principal objectives for this new policy: to provide a clear and transparent framework for housing enforcement activity, to ensure the council is able to meet its new duties and make full use of the strengthened powers available to us under the Renters' Rights Act, to raise standards across the private rented sector, protect residents and ensure landlords are held to account where they fail to meet their legal obligations. And this is important because, as we've said, 30% of households in Southwark rent privately, and while many landlords do provide good quality accommodation and take their responsibilities seriously, we know that conditions within parts of the private rented sector remain poorer than in other tenures. Some tenants continue to experience unsafe housing conditions, poor management practices and unlawful behaviour from a minority of landlords and letting agents. Poorly managed and maintained private rented homes not only impact the tenants living in them, but they can also affect the wider community. The council also has a responsibility for the many landlords who are responsible and provide a good service and quality homes to make sure that there is a level playing field. And a clear and robust enforcement framework helps ensure that those landlords are not undermined by those that fail to comply with the law. So colleagues and the audience may well be familiar with the Renters' Rights Act, which provides an opportunity to rebalance the power dynamic between tenants and landlords. And one of the key ways it will do this is by eliminating arbitrary no-fault evictions, limiting unfair rent rises and improving living standards. It will also give residents who rent from a private landlord greater security and stability to build long-term roots in their community. Obviously, the legislation alone won't realise these ambitions. The council needs to act robustly to monitor compliance with the new laws and take strong enforcement action where needed. So this policy provides some of those stronger and more consistent approaches to enforcement. It creates greater protection for tenants. It gives prison safety. It provides support for responsible landlords through a clear and transparent framework, and ultimately will hopefully create a fairer, safer, and more accountable private rented sector. We expect tenants to benefit. The policy will enable the council to enforce higher standards, creating better protection for tenants. The council will be able to impose increased financial penalties for landlords who breach their obligations. Any income generated here will be invested in bolstering enforcement activity, regulatory work and tenant protections. And longer term, improved housing quality and public health outcomes can be expected. We hope to reduce the community impacts associated with poor housing management and ultimately create greater confidence in the private rented sector. I therefore recommend that this executive approve the revised private sector housing enforcement policy and approve the associated officer delegations required to implement the policy. I also want to take this opportunity to thank council officers for all of their hard work on the policy and all of the investment and time that's gone into this. I'm hugely grateful for the work they've put in and the advice and support they've provided me in the first few weeks of being in this role. This policy puts residents first. It supports this administration's commitment to fixing the housing crisis and is an important and necessary first step towards a better regulated private rented sector. It provides a strong, clear and legally robust framework for enforcement. It strengthens protections for tenants, improves housing standards and ensures landlords who fail to meet their responsibilities can be held properly to account. In doing so, this policy helps to create a fairer, safer and more accountable private rented sector for everybody in the borough. I commend it to the executive.
Thank you very much, Councillor Watson. So I can see that Candida, Aled and Anju here. Do you have anything to add to this?
No, I think that was a pretty comprehensive summary. Nothing else to add.
Wonderful. Any questions from the executive? I've got Councillor Popula.
Cheers, Chair. May I ask, how would the private sector enforcement policy prevent the situation that we are currently seeing? Words share. How would the private sector enforcement policy prevent a situation like what we are currently seeing on St James's Estate from occurring again?
Thanks, Councillor Popula. And to colleagues who don't know, there are many residents currently living on the St James's Estate in South Bermondsey who are at risk of eviction or significant rent increases from the current landlord. Just to put on record, as we have said before, this council regards that mass eviction as shameful. Everyone deserves a secure home, and Councillor Popula, the leader, and I have met residents from the estate. We continue to be talking to the Tenants Association about the issues. Our residents have been working tirelessly to provide advice and support to tenants about their housing rights, and we're urgently investigating what more we can do to support our residents. The St James's Estate scandal unfortunately primarily relates to timing and perhaps in a rather cynical move, the notices were issued just before the Renters' Rights Act changed the law to rule these notices as unacceptable. Unfortunately, these Section 21s were issued before the abolition of those no-fault evictions. This policy and the new Act mean that landlords can no longer simply require tenants to leave without valid statutory grounds. So it would strengthen the council's position immeasurably, strengthens our ability to provide private tenants with protection from unjust displacement and poor landlord practices. It introduces an enforcement-led approach, enforcement-first approach to breaches of landlord legislation with stronger action available to us against harassment, unlawful eviction and other serious tenancy offences. It enables this council to impose fines of up to £40,000 for serious breaches and offences, alongside prosecution and other enforcement action. It also will help us to ensure that landlords are held accountable when housing standards or management practices fall short of legal requirements. It also would enable us to publish a naming and shaming of rogue landlords, including sharing that information for enforcement purposes through the GLA Rogue Landlords and Agents Checker and other publicity where it's in the public interest. I also want to take this opportunity to thank members of the St James's Attendance Association for coming to the town hall here today to meet the leader, Councillor Papula, and I, and to reassure them that we will continue doing everything we can to support them in this situation, and a further meeting is planned with the leader in the coming weeks.
Just to echo that, I say the tenants who are involved in that campaign are going through really difficult situation created by the shameful actions of their landlord, but being so impressed by the amazing way in which they're fighting back, and I think we should absolutely commend that. Do you have any further questions on this item? Yes, Councillor Walden-Day.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. That's really clear. You talked about raising standards across the private rental sector. Can I ask how that relates to our environmental and green ambitions?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Councillor Walden-Day. So I'm pleased to say that this policy will enable us to improve the quality and energy efficiency of private rented homes by strengthening enforcement against poor housing conditions, and that includes excess cold, damp and mould, which for a whole range of reasons are unacceptable. It supports some of the action that we can take around fuel poverty by working with partners, including the GLA, and government programmes to improve the energy efficiency, to improve the energy performance of homes and increase the uptake of energy efficiency measures. Enables us as a council to enforce the minimum energy efficiency standards, helping to ensure landlords invest in warmer, more energy efficient properties and reduce carbon emissions across the private rented sector. Also will help us hopefully to bring empty homes back into use, making better use of existing housing stock and reducing the need for additional development pressures on land and resources. And more broadly support Southwark's commitment to addressing climate change by ensuring the private rented sector plays its part in improving environmental performance and reducing emissions.
Great, thank you very much. I see no further questions. So in that case, can the executive please first of all agree to adopt the revised private sector housing enforcement policy? Agreed. And to delegate authority to the Strategic Director in line with item 2. But can we just agree all the recommendations? Let's just do it that way. Great, agreed, wonderful. So we're now an hour and 25 minutes into the meeting. I'm going to pick up the pace quite considerably from here. I appreciate that there are members of the executive who are planning to ask questions. I'm going to ask that those questions and those answers either be brief or non-existent, because we've only got 35 minutes to finish this. The rest of the meeting. I will leave it to your judgment. I won't prevent you from asking questions, but if you think a question is not necessary after all, then that could be helpful. Right, we're going to move on to item 10, which is the Policy and Resources Outturn Capital Monitoring Report. I'm going to hand over to Councillor Foster.
Thanks, Chair. Bearing in mind I have a number of reports and your reminders about the need for timeliness at this stage of the meeting, I'm not going to speak for too long, and I'm sure Tim or Clive will be able to come in to add anything that's necessary. So this is one of two outturn reports. They give the position of the capital and the revenue from the outgoing year. And they do tell quite different stories, basically, about where the council's finances are at. The council has an enormously ambitious capital programme. which requires a lot of additional borrowing to cover, and we're managing these costs prudently, but it is an ongoing risk for the administration, particularly with a volatile geopolitical environment that can change borrowing costs. I think the main thing to note really is the need for us to manage what is quite a robust income stream for capital investment, which is in stark contrast to our revenue position, which is under a huge amount of challenge. I think that just creates a political obligation for us to manage that in a prudent way, make sure that the money is being spent correctly in a strategic way, representing genuine long-term investment, in order that we don't have this sense of sort of feast in capital and famine in revenue, if you like. The housing investment programme has a huge challenge of its own. It overspent in the outgoing year, and I think that just it increases the consciousness we need to take of how difficult financing is in housing, the demands that we have to make investments of building safety upgrades, the lack of headroom that we have for borrowing, and continuing to try to get the HRA under control on the capital side is something we're keen to do. So I'll leave it there.
Anything to add from the officers?
Microphone telling me no.
Is it? Fine. Any questions from the executive? I see no questions. Can we action the recommendations? Agreed. Agreed. Wonderful. Moving to item 11, which is Policy and Resource Out and Revenue Monitoring Report. Back to Councillor Foster.
So this is the companion piece to the capital report, and as I flagged up, the picture here is significantly bleaker. It's a challenging one that reflects revenue budgets that are under sustained and worsening pressure, and we are seeing a trajectory of increasing overspends that are causing larger and larger drawdowns of reserves. So the drawdown reserves in this outturn report of 25.3 million is historically large. And to a large degree, it reflects the pressures that we're seeing in temporary accommodation and in social care, particularly adult social care, that are continuing this year, and this is going to be a big part of the picture going forwards. It's worth noting as well that a big part of how the council is looking to bring its finances under control is through an ambitious transformation programme. This last year targeted fairly significant savings and did not achieve them almost at all, and I think so that re-emphasises for us the need to be investing in this transformation program, doing it the right way, and ensuring that the savings that are targeted are actually delivered. The housing revenue account is in even greater challenge in some respects than our general fund. Actions were taken under the last administration basically as a sort of emergency to bring the budget under a degree of control, and the report notes that the HRA is not yet on a sustainable footing. So trying to get that is going to be a key priority. Yeah, I think I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Are they from the officers?
Just briefly to add, Councillor Foster rightly points out there's a £25 million drawdown on reserves in the year that's just finished. In the year that's just finished, our grant income from central government increased. Between now and 2030, our grant income from central government will decrease by £28 million. So it's just worth bearing in mind a £25 million overspend in the context of increasing grant is likely to get significantly bigger if we don't take action fairly quickly to resolve that over the next 3 years.
Thank you for that negative news. Okay, I've got any further questions from the executive? I don't see any. In that case, can we action the recommendations? Agreed. Sorry. Moving on to item 12, the Policy and Resources Financial Remit Report, and this is back to Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. So the Financial Remit Report is a kind of state of play of the budget that looks forward rather than the backward-looking outturn reports. And it sets the scene for how we've arrived as administration and the challenges that we're facing financially, And I think we're all kind of in agreement that perhaps the central challenge of the administration is a financial challenge. As I alluded to earlier, we've come in at a time of austerity, which is essentially a permanent feature of life now, not a response to a post-financial crisis era, but more like how we live our lives with budgets for things fraying and everyone having to do more with less, living standards under threat while concentrations of wealth in the hands of the super rich increase. We have a volatile economic environment for a number of different reasons. And it's important as we talk about these things that they're not just budgetary pressure on local authorities. The local authority budget pressure is a second order effect of the impacts these have on ordinary people. And you can see that clearly in the two key sources of pressure that I mentioned in social care and in temporary accommodation. These are the kind of second order budgetary impacts of social crises in social care and in housing, which successive governments have failed to address. And then, as Tim mentioned, within this context, and without any real rationale, the current government, in its recent funding settlement, decided to cut our direct grant funding by an enormously substantial amount. And when I say without any rationale, there was a bit of a story around the need for increased investment elsewhere and a kind of rebalancing, but I don't think that anyone in Southwark feels there's been a story about why we should receive less money in particular. And of course, the outgoing administration, they were in an election year. They sort of trumpeted their all investment, no cuts budget. We can see that in fact, did not prevent us coming in at a time when services were falling away, as we've now taken action to prevent. But it does mean as well that we are looking to see quite an even larger drawdown in reserves likely for this year, while they was postponing the difficult choices. So we've kind of become poorer as a council without those underlying pressures being addressed. So the task of doing that lies with us. I'll touch on the spending in the housing revenue account. There is I suppose perhaps I don't need to go into detail since I spoke to it in terms of the revenue outturn report, but needing to turn this around, both in terms of addressing the failings that were mentioned by the housing regulator, as well as bring the budget under control, is an enormous challenge that we're all facing. I should touch on as well that the size of the financial gap that we're reporting here has increased from previously. So the number that was being used before was £85 million. The gap is now £102 million, and that largely reflects a truer assessment of the ongoing cost of temporary accommodation, which has had years and years of not decreasing and was previously just causing continuous overspends and leading to an ever greater use of reserves. And something that the administration is committed to is a sustainable financial situation that doesn't require this, that doesn't see our reserves dwindling forever into critically dangerous territory. So just to touch briefly on the savings process, in order to address the scale of the challenge, we have to conduct a savings process that is more rigorous and more open than Southwark has ever previously undertaken. We have to be taking our decisions robustly and with as much care as possible to ensure we can do all the things that we want to do in our affordable, safe and green agenda, and also to protect our communities from the impacts of austerity. So we're committed to finding every possible way to make the council more efficient, to eliminate waste, to protect essential services and our support for those who need it most, and critically as well, to bring the people of Southwark into the process. So we will be launching a large-scale budget participation exercise to consult our communities, to use their knowledge and understanding in order to make our budget as rigorous as it can possibly be, and to ensure that we can continue to do the things that matter to us all, despite the substantial loss of funding. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Do officers have anything to add to that?
Nothing to add, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the executive? I see no questions. In that case, can we approve the recommendations? Great. Wonderful. Now moving on to item 13, which is governance arrangements for the monitoring of community infrastructure levy and section 106 projects. This is Councillor Foster again.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of this governance arrangements, I think this is something where there's a widespread recognition of the shortcomings in the governance surrounding community infrastructure levy, particularly the neighbourhood community infrastructure levy funding, and the need to strengthen the oversight, the project management, how things are scoped, and what the accountability of these projects is. And the central recommendation of this paper is to bolster these governance arrangements, both for SIL and for Section 106 projects, by placing them within the overall capital governance framework. So the bids and monitoring of SIL and Section 106 will be within a single overarching framework for capital governance that will increase the strategic consistency and improve the monitoring and the visibility of our projects. As I mentioned in the capital outturn report, we have a large pipeline of capital projects overall. We have a pipeline that's coming of additional SIL and Section 106 money. And as we are sort of impoverished on the revenue side, it's really, really critical that we're spending this money well. And I think that in the past, it has felt a bit like SIL is some sort of extra money that you can kind of just spend in any way without it having the same level of oversight and robustness that we place on our other forms of spending. So flies attacking me. So that's something that we wish to strengthen. I think it sits alongside our ambitions to return to community councils as well. We wish to empower our neighbourhoods and our structures to take decisions locally. That is a better way, we think, of taking decisions than relying solely on the judgment of ward councillors largely. That's something that Councillor Chamberlain will be leading on. And these two ideas are complementary, that we have a grassroots decision making for our SIL to spend the money that we get as sort of compensation for development, if you like, in a way that really benefits the communities, and that also sits within a framework of accountability to ensure that the projects are properly delivered, that they actually happen, that they have value for money, and that they have a robust level of oversight as well.
Thank you very much, Councillor Foster. Do you have anything to add from the officers?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Executive? No? Can we approve the recommendations? Wonderful. And thank you. I think that's the end of your run, Councillor Foster. So thank you very much for everything there. Let's move on to item 14, which is the local plan timetable. And I'm going to hand over to the Deputy Leader.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to present this report, which seeks approval from the Executive for the local plan timetable 26-29. The paper marks the formal beginning of one of the most exciting and important pieces of work that this joint administration will be taking over the coming years, the preparation of our new Southwark Plan 2045. The report before the Executive does not determine planning policy, rather it's fulfilling our statutory duty at this point to adopt a revised timetable to follow the government's new planning regulations, which came into force earlier in the year. It also gives formal notice that Southwark is commencing the preparation of the new local plan under this new accelerated plan making system. The timetable sets out a really clear programme over the next 3 years with consultative stages, engagement with the planning inspectorate, and ultimately the adoption of our Southwark plan in 2029. Importantly, it provides certainty and transparency for residents, businesses, developers, and all those with an interest in the built environment of our borough. But today's decision is actually more than just meeting that statutory requirement, because this local plan is the document that will shape how our borough grows over the many decades to come. It's going to determine where we build the new homes, how we protect and enhance our town centres and neighbourhoods, how we support local jobs and businesses, how we provide security for residents, and how we deliver infrastructure that communities need, as well as responding to the climate emergency. This joint administration has been really clear that growth must work for our residents. We want a planning framework that delivers genuinely affordable homes, that creates healthy and safe neighbourhoods, supports thriving high streets, projects, and enhances green spaces, and ensures development contributes positively to communities rather than simply happening to them. Those ambitions will be reflected in the new Southwark plan. I also want to reassure residents that there will be significant opportunities to help shape the plan. We believe and are committed to meaningful engagement as a joint administration. We will improve that process in this local plan, and that will begin with scoping the consultation later this year, but we'll continue at every stage of the preparation of the new local plan. So today, I ask the Executive to approve the recommendations before us to formally commence the preparation of the Southwark Plan 2024 and adopt the revised local plan timetable and ensure that officers keep that timetable updated as required under the new planning system. I'd also like to put on record thanks to officers for the work that you've done today in getting us to this stage, and look forward to working with you over the next 4 years. So I commend the report to the Executive.
Thank you, Councillor Chamberlain. Do you have any questions on this report? Oh, sorry, no. Do you have anything to add from the officers on this report?
All I would say is how important this is.
We all know who you are, but the throngs of people on YouTube do not.
All I would say is how important the new plan will be. Future planning decisions will be made on those policies, and once those policies are adopted, we can't change them. So the time for communities to be involved is now, really, and as we develop those new policies, because it is too late once it's adopted, and it's very difficult to change them. So we're working with all executive members, actually, I suspect, in how we consult them and our communities in bringing forward a vision for Southwark, which will run to 2045. So we look forward to working with everybody.
Thanks, Steve. Any questions? No, I see no questions. In that case, can we approve the recommendations?
Agreed.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Right, we're now on item 15, which is appointments to outside bodies. So we do have a number of contested positions, and I want to make sure that I'm doing this correctly. So you can jump in and tell me if I'm not. I think we do the contested positions first, don't we?
Yes.
Yes. Right, so there are 3 contested positions which we need to vote on first before approving the overall list. So the first contested position is for the blue Bermondsey bid. There is 1 position and there are 2 candidates. One candidate is Councillor Andy Bates. The second candidate is Councillor Rachel Bentley. Can you please put your hand up if you are going to vote for Councillor Andy Bates? That is 0. Can you please put your hand up if you're voting for Councillor Rachel Bentley? That's 10. Councillor Bentley is successful. We then have 1 position for Mountview, for which there are 2 candidates. One candidate is Councillor Sabina Emanuel, one candidate is Councillor Janice White. Can I please see anyone voting for Councillor Sabina Emanuel? Thank you, that's 0. Any votes for Councillor Janice White? That's 10. Thank you. So that was Councillor Janice White who was elected. And finally, for the Walworth group, we have 2 nominations for 1 post. One is Councillor John Batterson, and one is Councillor Vanessa Threadgold. Can I see votes for Councillor John Batterson? That's 0. Can I see votes for Councillor Vanessa Threadgold? That's 10. Right, so those 3 positions are now inserted into the report, and all remaining, can we accept the recommendations for all remaining posts? Agreed. Have I missed anything there? That's covered. Great, wonderful. Right, for item 16, this time we do not have contested posts. So in that case, we are just accepting the recommendations to appoint the listed nominees onto the panels, boards, and forums. Is that agreed? Agreed. Wonderful. Next we have item 17 is motions referred from Council Assembly. We have a number of motions that were passed by Council Assembly which broadly talk about how wonderful Southwark Labour are. I'm going to ask that we note those motions. Agreed, they are noted. Item 18, so this is a report from the Housing Scrutiny Commission. So we would normally invite the chair of the Scrutiny Commission to speak on their report. The chair of the Housing Scrutiny Commission that wrote this report is no longer a councillor, so they are not able to do that. But I do want to put on my note my thanks to the members of the Housing Scrutiny Commission for their hard work, and we will be giving a full response to this report in due course, I think, at the next meeting. But for the moment, can we just note the recommendations? Agreed. Item 19 is a report to the Environment, Community Safety and Engagement Scrutiny Commission. Again, we would normally invite the chair. The chair is no longer a councillor. I want to put a note my thanks to the members of the commission for their hard work. We will respond to the report in due course. But for the moment, can we please note the recommendations of the commission? Thank you very much. That is the conclusion of the open section to this meeting. So to anyone watching online or anyone in the room, thank you very much for coming to join us for this exciting inaugural meeting of our new administration. But we are now going to close off the live feed and eject everyone from the room so we can conclude the final business in closed session.